See, he forged a dead man's name, stole a woman's future, and sent her 600 miles into the wilderness with nothing but a lie in her pocket. See, that was the moment Silas Vane decided Eliza Marlowe's life no longer belonged to her. See, he never expected her to fight back. See, she arrived at the end of a rail line with a battered suitcase, a fistful of letters from a man who had never written them, and a heart that had already been broken so many times she had stopped counting the cracks. See, what happened next in that dust-choked frontier town would strip away everything she thought she knew about herself and rebuild her from the ground up. See, if you had been standing on that platform the day the train left her behind, watching a young woman realize the man she traveled 600 miles to marry had never asked for her, what would you have done? See, if this story moves you, subscribe to our channel and follow Eliza's journey all the way to the end, because what this woman does next will stay with you. See, hit the like button and drop a comment telling me your city and country. See, I want to see how far this story travels. See, the letter had arrived on a Tuesday. Eliza remembered that specific detail because Tuesdays were laundry days at the boarding house where she worked, and her hands had been raw and red from the washboard when Mrs. See, Pratt called her name from the bottom of the staircase. See, she had wiped her hands on her apron, taken the envelope, and then stood in the narrow hallway reading it 3 times before she trusted what the words were saying. See, Dear Miss Marlowe, I have come to understand through a mutual acquaintance that you are a woman of strong character and modest circumstance. See, I am a rancher in the Western Territory, a man of 40 acres and honest ambition, and I find myself in need of a practical and capable wife. See, I do not offer poetry or flattery. I offer a home, fair treatment, and a future that need not be borrowed from someone else's charity. See, if you are willing, I would ask that you write back. See, respectfully, Gideon Rourke, Red Hollow. She had stood in that hallway for a long time. See, Eliza Marlowe was 22 years old and had spent the better part of 6 years working in other people's houses, washing other people's clothes. See, sleeping in a room barely wide enough for a cot and a small window that looked out over someone else's garden. See, she was not ugly and she was not stupid, but she had been told often enough by employers, by distant relatives, by the particular silence of empty rooms, that she was the kind of woman the world arranged things around rather than for. See, she was a convenience, a useful pair of hands, nothing more. See, the letter felt different, not because it was romantic. See, it wasn't. Gideon Rourke had not described sunsets or used the word heart even once. See, but he had described her correctly strong character, modest circumstance, without having met her, and he had offered something she had not received in years without being asked to perform for it first. See, he had offered plain respect. She wrote back that same night after the dinner dishes were done and Mrs. See, Pratt had retired. She wrote carefully, truthfully, listing what she could do: keep accounts, mend clothing, manage a household budget, tend animals, and what she could not do, which was pretend to be something she wasn't. See, she sent the letter the following morning and did not allow herself to hope for a response. See, the response came in 11 days, and then another. See, and then another. Over the following 4 months, 12 letters passed between Eliza Marlowe and the man who signed his name Gideon Rourke. See, she learned that he was 31, that he had inherited his ranch from his father, that his mother and younger sister lived with him, that the previous year had been hard and dry. See, and that he was a man who chose his words carefully because he did not believe in wasting them. See, she read those letters until the paper went soft at the folds. See, she told herself she was being practical. She was evaluating an arrangement. See, she was not a young girl with her head full of songs, and she was not going west for love. See, but she kept those letters in a tin box beneath her cot, and on the nights when the boarding house felt small and airless, and the future looked like an infinite hallway of other people's laundry, see, she would take out the most recent one and read it again. See, you ask whether I think a person can start over, the 7th letter had said. See, I think starting over is the only thing most of us ever really do. See, the question is whether you do it alone or alongside someone worth the trouble. See, she had read that sentence so many times she could recite it in her sleep. See, the morning she packed her suitcase, Mrs. Pratt had stood in the doorway of her room and watched with the particular expression of a woman who wanted to warn someone, but wasn't sure she had the right. See, you don't know this man, Mrs. Pratt finally said. See, I know his letters, Eliza answered. Letters lie. See, Eliza had fastened the latch on her suitcase and looked up. See, so do faces, she said. At least letters take effort. See, Mrs. Pratt had not argued further. See, she had pressed $2 into Eliza's hand at the door and told her to be careful, and Eliza had taken the money and said she would, and both of them had understood that careful was a luxury that women in Eliza's position rarely got to afford. See, the train ride had taken 3 days. She had eaten sparingly, slept sitting upright, and spent most of the journey watching the landscape change outside the window, the crowded eastern streets giving way to open farmland. See, the farmland stretching into something broader and wilder than she had words for. See, other passengers came and went. See, a family with 4 children boarded in the second state, and the youngest, a girl about 5 years old with braids coming undone, fell asleep against Eliza's arm somewhere past the midpoint and didn't wake for 2 hours. See, Eliza had not moved. She hadn't wanted to disturb her. See, she had looked at that child's sleeping face and thought about the letters in her tin box, packed now in the bottom of her suitcase, and for the first time, she had allowed herself something she usually refused. See, she had allowed herself to imagine it, the ranch, the family, the room that would be hers, the particular ordinary dignity of a life that belonged to her. See, she had killed the thought before it went further. See, but it had been there. Red Hollow materialized out of the late afternoon dust like something the landscape had reluctantly agreed to accommodate. See, it was not what she had pictured. The buildings were real but raw, the kind of construction that had happened in a hurry without anyone consulting a plan. See, the main street was unpaved, and the wind moved through it with an authority that suggested it had been there long before the town and expected to remain long after. See, the train platform was a plank of weathered wood elevated about 18 inches off the ground. See, Eliza stepped down from the car, set her suitcase beside her, and looked for a man matching any description she had assembled from 12 letters. See, the platform was not crowded, a family reuniting on the far end. See, 2 men in work clothes moving freight, a woman with a basket who glanced at Eliza once and looked away. See, no one was looking for her. She told herself he was simply late. See, ranchers had unpredictable schedules. Something had come up with the cattle. See, it was a long ride from his property into town, any of these things. See, she stood on that platform for 1 hour. The train had long since continued west. See, the family had gone. The freight workers had finished. See, the woman with the basket had walked back toward the main street. See, the late afternoon light was changing color, taking on the particular reddish tone that she would later associate with Red Hollow at its most uncompromising. See, and then a horse came up the road. She saw him before he saw her, a big man on a dark horse, broad through the shoulders, moving at a working pace rather than a hurried one. See, he had dark hair going gray at the temples and a face that had been outside in all weather long enough that it showed the record of every season. See, he was not the kind of handsome that women wrote about. See, he was the kind of useful that outlasted handsome by 30 years. See, he stopped at the edge of the platform and looked at her the way a man looks at something he cannot immediately account for. See, you waiting for someone, he said. Gideon Rourke, she said. See, something moved across his face, not recognition the way she had expected. See, something closer to a man who has just heard his own name used incorrectly. See, I'm Gideon Rourke, he said, and the way he said it carefully, with the particular flatness of a man who is waiting to understand something before he reacts, made the first cold thread pull tight somewhere behind Eliza's sternum. See, I'm Eliza Marlowe, she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. See, we've been corresponding for 4 months. You wrote to me about your ranch. See, you asked me to come. Silence. Not the silence of a man searching his memory. See, the silence of a man who has already searched it and found nothing where there should be something. See, Miss Marlowe, Gideon Rourke said slowly, I have never written a letter to anyone named Eliza Marlowe. See, and I have never advertised for a bride. The world did not tilt. See, that was the strange part. The world stayed completely flat and level, and the light kept doing what it was doing, and the wind kept moving through the empty street. See, and Eliza stood on that platform with a suitcase at her feet and 12 folded letters in a tin box and understood, with a clarity that felt almost physical, see, that everything she had believed for 4 months was built on something that had never existed. See, she did not cry. She had learned not to cry in public the way some people learn not to flinch. See, then someone wrote to me in your name, she said. See, appears so, he said. And I have no money to get back, she said. See, and I have nowhere to stay. He looked at her for a long moment. See, she saw him weighing it, the inconvenience, the complication, the sheer awkward wrongness of the situation. See, she had spent enough time watching men calculate what a woman's problem was going to cost them that she could read the arithmetic in real time. See, then he swung down from his horse. My mother would have words for me I don't care to repeat, he said, if I left a woman stranded on a train platform at nightfall. See, Rourke Ridge has a spare room. You can stay until we figure out what happened. See, it was not romantic. It was not gallant. It was the offer of a practical man who had been raised by a woman who had taught him that some things were simply not done. See, Eliza picked up her suitcase. Thank you, she said. See, she said it the way she said most things plainly, without decoration, without either gratitude that diminished her or pride that refused reasonable help. See, she climbed into his wagon because there was no reasonable alternative. See, she did not know yet that the man who had forged those letters was not finished with her. See, she did not know that she had been sent west deliberately, that someone had calculated her loneliness like a number in a ledger and used it against her. See, she did not know that the letters she had kept in a tin box for 4 months were not the worthless lies they now seemed, but evidence, the beginning of a thread that, if she were brave enough to pull it, see, would expose something that a very dangerous man had invested considerable effort in keeping buried. See, she knew none of that. She knew only that the train was gone, the platform was empty, the man beside her was a stranger, and she had exactly what she had always had herself, and whatever she was willing to do with that. See, the wagon moved away from the platform as the last of the light left the sky. See, behind them, the empty track stretched east toward a life that was no longer hers. See, ahead, in the darkening distance, the shape of Rourke Ridge waited. See, she gripped the edge of the wagon bench and kept her back straight and did not let the fear show on her face, because she had made a decision somewhere on that 3-day train ride that she had not fully articulated even to herself until this moment. See, she had not come 600 miles to fall apart on a stranger's platform. See, whatever had brought her here, and she was beginning to understand that whatever was darker and more deliberate than she had imagined she was here. See, her feet were on this ground, her hands were in her lap. See, her mind was working. And Eliza Marlowe, when her mind was working, was not as easy to destroy as someone had apparently assumed. See, the horse's hooves beat a steady rhythm on the dry road. See, she watched the dark shapes of the land move past her and thought about the letters, already beginning to understand that they were not evidence of her foolishness. See, they were evidence of someone else's crime. And the woman sitting rigid on that wagon bench, trying not to show fear to a man who had not asked for any of this, had spent enough years being underestimated that she had quietly, see, without ever announcing it, become very, very good at being underestimated. See, that was the one advantage the person who had forged those letters had not counted on. See, Eliza had arrived unwanted. What she carried with her was something else entirely. See, the wagon ride to Rourke Ridge took 40 minutes, and neither of them spoke for most of it. See, that was fine with Eliza. She had learned early in life that silence was not always hostile. Sometimes it was simply two people deciding what they were to each other before committing any words to the question. See, She used those 40 minutes the way she used most uncomfortable situations, which was to observe carefully and keep her conclusions to herself until she had more information. See, Gideon Rourke drove the way he apparently did most things, without wasted movement, without conversation that didn't serve a purpose, with a steadiness that was neither warm nor cold, but simply present. See, he kept the horse to a moderate pace on the dark road and didn't look at her more than necessary. See, she got the impression he was not a man who stared at problems, but rather a man who sat beside them and waited to see what they did next. See, she couldn't decide yet whether that quality would work in her favor or against her. See, the ranch announced itself before she could see it clearly, a smell of hay and horses and wood smoke that carried differently than the town dust. See, something lived in and particular to a place where the same people had been doing the same work for long enough that the land had absorbed it. See, then a lamp in a window, then the dark shapes of outbuildings, then the house itself, which was not what she had been quietly dreading. See, she had expected something barely habitable. What she saw was a house that had been added to over time by people who cared enough to keep adding a main structure with a broad porch, a newer wing to the east. See, a kitchen garden along the south side that someone had staked and organized with genuine attention. See, it was not a fine house, but it was a cared-for house, and in Eliza's experience, those were rarer and more valuable than fine ones. See, before the wagon fully stopped, the front door opened and light spilled out across the porch boards, and a woman appeared in the doorway. See, Lenora Rourke was somewhere past 60, though she carried her age the way certain women do, not fighting it, not surrendering to it, but simply declining to let it run the show. See, she was shorter than her son by nearly a foot, broad through the shoulders, with white hair pulled back in a practical knot and eyes that moved quickly and missed very little. See, she stood in her own doorway, the way a person stands on ground they have owned long enough that ownership is no longer something they think about. See, she looked at the wagon, she looked at Eliza, she looked at her son. See, "You're later than I expected," she said to Gideon. See, "Had a situation at the station," he said, climbing down. See, "I can see that," Lenora said, and her eyes moved back to Eliza in a way that was direct without being unkind. See, "You going to introduce me, or are you going to stand there making the girl wonder if she's invisible?" See, Gideon rubbed the back of his neck. "This is Eliza Marlowe. See, she came in on the evening train. Someone sent her letters with my name on them, told her she was coming to marry me." See, Lenora was quiet for a moment. "Told her she was coming to marry you," she repeated. See, "That's what she said. And did she write back to these letters?" See, "She did," Eliza said, because she was not going to sit on a wagon and be discussed at a distance if she could speak for herself. See, 4 months of correspondence, 12 letters. I have all of them. See, Lenora looked at her steadily. "You saved everyone?" See, "I save things I consider important," Eliza said. "I considered them important." See, something shifted in Lenora's expression. Not pity. Eliza was braced for pity, and it didn't come. See, what came instead was the particular look of a woman who has sorted through enough people in her life to recognize when she is looking at someone real. See, "Come inside," Lenora said. "You can eat something and we'll talk." See, Eliza climbed down from the wagon without waiting to be helped. See, she picked up her suitcase and carried it herself up the porch steps and through the front door, and if Lenora noticed, which she certainly did, she didn't comment on it. See, the inside of the house smelled like wood polish and something savory that had been on the stove for hours. See, the main room had a fireplace that had been used hard for years and a table big enough for 6 with mismatched chairs that had each been repaired at least once. See, a younger woman was standing at the kitchen end of the room, and she turned when the door opened and stared at Eliza with the frank, unguarded curiosity of someone who had not yet learned to pretend she wasn't looking. See, this was Maeve. She was perhaps 17, with her mother's quick eyes and her brother's coloring. See, and she had flour on her left wrist, and the expression of someone who had been waiting all evening for something interesting to happen, and had just been delivered something considerably more interesting than she had anticipated. See, is she staying? Maeve asked her mother. Maeve, Lenora said. See, I'm just asking. She's staying tonight, Gideon said from behind Eliza. See, beyond that, we'll figure out in the morning. Eliza set her suitcase down near the wall where it would not be in anyone's way. See, I don't want to be a difficulty, she said. If there's something I can do to help while I'm here, I will. See, I'm not accustomed to sitting idle. Nobody here is, Lenora said, already moving back toward the stove. See, sit down, Miss Marlowe. There's stew and there's bread, and we don't make guests eat standing up. See, I'm not exactly a guest, Eliza said. No, Lenora agreed, setting a bowl on the table. See, you're not, but you're not a problem either, so sit down and eat before I decide you're too stubborn to feed. See, Eliza sat. The stew was plain and good potato and salt pork, and something with a dried herb she couldn't name, and she ate 2 full bowls because she had eaten almost nothing for 3 days, and her body had been quietly protesting for hours. See, nobody watched her eat, which she was grateful for. See, Maeve settled across the table and asked her questions with the subtlety of a very young person who has decided questions are more efficient than subtlety. See, where had she come from? How long had she been on the train? Had she ever been this far west before? What did she do for work back east? Was she really going to stay? See, Maeve, Gideon said from his chair near the fire. See, she doesn't have to answer one she doesn't like, Maeve said reasonably. See, Eliza looked at the girl across the table. I worked in a boarding house, she said. See, I came from a town called Belhaven. I've never been west of the river before tonight. See, I did laundry and cleaning and helped with the accounts, and yes, I kept all the ledgers. She paused. See, and I don't know yet whether I'm staying. That depends on things I don't have answers to. See, what things? Who wrote me those letters and why? See, Maeve's eyes went wide. Someone pretended to be Gideon? See, apparently. That's Maeve looked at her brother. See, that's a criminal thing, isn't it? Forging a man's name? See, it is, Gideon said. He was looking at the fire and not at either of them. See, it's also a specific kind of stupid because it leaves a paper trail. See, Eliza looked at him then. You believe me, she said. See, it came out as a statement, but it was really a question, and they both knew it. See, he looked up. You walked off a train with 12 letters you didn't know were forged, and you're sitting in a stranger's house at 9 in the evening. See, you're either telling the truth or you're the most committed liar I've met, and you don't have the eyes of a liar. He said it flatly, without decoration, like a man reading a weather report. See, you have the eyes of someone who just got hit with information they haven't finished processing. See, she looked at him for a moment. That's accurate, she said. See, thought so. The fire snapped. Maeve looked between them with barely concealed fascination and then had the rare sense to say nothing. See, later Lenora showed her to the spare room, which was at the back of the newer wing. See, it was not large. A single bed with a quilt that had been washed enough times that the pattern was to something approximate. A window that faced the east. A small table with a lamp. See, a peg on the wall for clothes. The basin's in the hall, Lenora said. See, breakfast is at 6. You don't have to get up at 6, but that's when it's made. See, I'll be up at 6, Eliza said. Lenora started to leave and then didn't. See, she stood in the doorway with her hand on the frame, and Eliza waited. See, I don't know who wrote those letters, Lenora said finally. See, and I don't know what they wanted, but I'm sorry it happened. See, you came a long way trusting something that wasn't real, and that's a hard thing, and I want you to know that however long you're here, you have my word you're safe in this house. See, Eliza had been braced for many things. She had not been braced for that particular sentence, delivered in that particular matter-of-fact tone by a woman who was simply stating a fact about her own home. See, she felt something move in her throat that she refused to let get any further. See, thank you, she said, plain, simple, the only word she trusted herself with. See, Lenora nodded once, like a woman who has said what needed saying and sees no reason to elaborate, and pulled the door closed. See, Eliza sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her suitcase. See, she did not open the tin box. She was not ready for that yet. See, instead she sat in the quiet and listened to the sounds of the ranch settling around her, the distant shift of horses, The wind along the eaves, the low murmur of Gideon and Lenora talking in the front room. See, too quiet for words, but enough to know the rhythm of people who knew each other well enough not to need volume. See, she thought about what Gideon had said, a specific kind of stupid because it leaves a paper trail. See, he was right. Whoever had written those letters signed them, sealed them, arranged for them to be posted, had created evidence. See, 12 pieces of evidence, all sitting in a tin box in a battered suitcase in a strange room. See, the question was not whether there was a trail. The question was where it led and what was at the end of it. See, she lay down without changing her clothes and was asleep in 4 minutes, which surprised her. See, she had expected to lie awake for hours. Instead, her body simply made the decision without consulting the rest of her, and the last thing she was aware of was the east window going from black to the color of nothing. See, and the first thing she was aware of was the smell of coffee and the sound of Maeve somewhere being told to keep her voice down. See, she was up and in the kitchen at 5 minutes to 6. See, Lenora looked at her over the rim of a coffee cup and said nothing about the fact that Eliza was still wearing yesterday's clothes. See, she simply handed her a cup of coffee and went back to the skillet. See, that was the first morning. There were more. She had not planned to stay more than a few days. See, a few days stretched to a week. Because there was no reasonable alternative, she had no money for a return train ticket and no clear place to return to, and every attempt she made to think through her options ended in the same practical dead end. See, in the meantime, she could either sit in the spare room being useless, or she could work. See, Eliza had never been able to sit in a room being useless. See, she started with the things that were visibly undone, a basket of mending that had been accumulating for what looked like most of the season. See, some fencing on the kitchen garden that had come loose from its stakes and was allowing something small and determined to get at the turnips. See, she repaired the mending and fixed the fencing and said nothing about either, and Lenora noticed, both without commenting, which was exactly the right response. See, then she found the ledgers. They were on a shelf in what passed for Gideon's office, a small room off the main hall with a desk, a lot of paper, and the general atmosphere of a space where serious decisions were made and nobody enjoyed making them. See, the ledgers were behind 3 seasons of unfiled receipts and a stack of letters from the bank that she did not read because they were not addressed to her. See, but the ledgers themselves, when she took them down and opened them, told her a story without any additional context required. See, Rourke Ridge was not failing, but it was not comfortable. See, the numbers had the particular tight quality of a household that had been managing by skill and discipline for years. See, the kind of careful accounting that looked fine from a distance and showed its stress only when you added it up month by month and noticed where the margins had been quietly shrinking. See, she put the ledgers back exactly where she had found them and went out to the garden and thought about what she had seen. See, that evening, she asked Gideon if she could help with the accounts. See, he was at the table going over what looked like a feed invoice, and he looked up at her with an expression that was not quite suspicion and not quite surprise, something between the two that settled into caution. See, you said you kept ledgers back east, he said, for the boarding house. See, 4 years. You understand spread costs, supply tracking? See, better than most people who get paid to do it, she said. See, not bragging, stating. He studied her for a moment. See, the books are on the shelf in the back room. I know, she said. See, I found them yesterday. A beat of silence. You went into my office. See, the door was open. I was looking for something to mend, and I looked wrong. She met his eyes without apology. See, I didn't read anything private. I looked at the ledgers because I know what a ledger looks like, and I wanted to see how the ranch was running. See, and you're doing better than a lot of people in this territory. See, but the supply costs on the eastern route are eating about 11% more than they should, and whoever's pricing your cattle feed is doing it at a margin that doesn't reflect the actual market. See, the silence that followed was a different kind than the one she had gotten used to from him. See, 11%, he said. Approximately. I'd want to check the current prices at the Red Hollow Mercantile before I said it exactly. See, he looked at her for a long moment. Not the calculating look she knew from employers assessing how much use she was. See, something else, the look of a man reassessing an assumption he had made without realizing he'd made it. See, all right, he said, and pushed the feed invoice across the table. See, tell me what you see. She sat down across from him and they went through the numbers for 2 hours. See, and by the end of it, she had identified 3 separate places where Rourke Ridge was paying more than it should, and 1 place where a supplier had overcharged on a delivery and apparently expected no one to notice. See, someone's been overcharging us on winter grain for 2 years, she said. See, I've been paying it, Gideon said, because you're a rancher, not an accountant. See, it's not an insult, it's a job description. Numbers aren't interesting to most people until they start lying. See, do numbers lie often? Constantly, she said, usually for someone else's benefit. See, he sat back in his chair and ran a hand across his jaw. See, he had the look of a man absorbing information that required him to revise a certain number of things simultaneously. See, I owe you for this, he said. You gave me a room, she said. See, I don't owe you and you don't owe me. We're even. See, that's not how I was raised. I wasn't raised to accept charity without giving something back, she said. See, so call it what it is, 2 people doing what they're each good at. See, no debt involved. He looked at her with that particular flatness that she was starting to understand was not coldness, but simply the absence of performance. See, Gideon Rourke said what he meant because he didn't see the purpose in saying anything else. See, and the expression he was wearing right now was the expression of a man who has just met someone operating on the same principle and finds it unexpectedly disorienting. See, fair enough, he said. She gathered the papers she'd been working from and stacked them neatly. See, I'll want to go into town this week. Look at current supply prices. See, if I'm going to fix the feed cost problem, I need current numbers. See, I'll take you Friday, he said. I can go alone. See, I'm sure you can. See, but Red Hollow on a Friday morning has about 20 men at the feed store, and you'll get further with me beside you than without, and I'm going in anyway. So that's not an argument about your capability. It's an argument about efficiency. See, she considered that. It was accurate, which she found mildly irritating. See, Friday then, she said. See, she took the ledgers back to her room that night and worked by lamplight until her eyes started refusing to focus. And when she finally set them aside, she lay back and stared at the ceiling and realized something that surprised her. See, she had not thought about the letters for 6 hours. See, not about who had written them or why or what it meant. See, for 6 hours, she had been entirely occupied with numbers and problems, and the particular satisfaction of finding an error and working backward to its source. And everything else had simply not been loud enough to compete. See, she turned her head and looked at the tin box sitting on the small table. See, 12 letters. A forged name. A deliberate lie. She had been telling herself since she arrived that the most important thing was to figure out what had happened and then figure out how to leave. See, find out who had written those letters. See, address the practical consequences. See, secure some money, move on. See, but lying in the dark on a ranch at the edge of a frontier territory with the smell of horses and wood smoke and someone's bread coming from the kitchen, she found herself sitting with a question she hadn't allowed herself before. See, why her specifically? Not why had someone forged Gideon Rourke's name. See, not why had someone used the mail order arrangement. See, those were questions about method. The real question was, why Eliza Marlowe? See, she was not wealthy. She was not connected. She had no family worth speaking of, no employer who would ask after her, no one who would notice particularly quickly if she simply went somewhere and didn't send word. See, a boarding house worker from a middling eastern town was not an obvious target for any kind of scheme worth the effort of 12 letters. See, unless the scheme wasn't about who she was now, unless it was about something she had and didn't know she had. See, she sat up in the dark and reached for the tin box. See, she opened it and took out the letters and spread them on the quilt, in order 1 through 12, and read them again from the beginning. See, not for comfort this time, not to remember the versions of Gideon Rourke she had constructed from these words. See, with different eyes, the eyes of a woman who now knew these were not what they claimed to be, and was looking for what they actually were. See, the early letters were general, appropriate things for a stranger to say when proposing an arrangement description of the ranch, the territory, what he needed, what he offered. See, nothing specific enough to be suspicious. But the fourth letter. See, she stopped at the fourth letter. I understand you have some family matters still unresolved back east, it read. See, I would not expect those to interfere with our arrangement. See, whatever you are owed regardless of where you choose to make your home. See, she had read that sentence before and taken it for generosity, a man telling her she didn't need to settle her affairs before coming. See, she had found it kind. She was reading it differently now. See, whatever you are owed. She stared at that phrase for a long time. See, she had never told Gideon Rourke, the real Gideon Rourke, the man on the horse who had never heard of her about her family. See, she had never told anyone about her family because there was almost nothing to tell. See, her father had died when she was 14, her mother when she was 17. See, there were no siblings. The only remaining relative she knew of was a great uncle she had never met. See, a man named Harlan Marlowe, who had gone west himself 30 years ago, and from whom she had received exactly one piece of communication in her life, a letter when she turned 21 from a lawyer's office, see, informing her that Harlan Marlowe had passed and that there was an inheritance question that would require her attention at some point. See, she had filed that letter in her tin box without fully addressing it because the lawyer's office was far away and she had no money for travel and no way to know what inheritance question meant in practical terms when you were. See, a woman with no resources and no one to advise you. See, she had mentioned it, she realized, in one of her letters. See, the sixth one. She had mentioned in passing that she had some unresolved property matter from a deceased relative that she hadn't yet been able to address. See, whatever you are owed. The person who had written this letter already knew what she was owed. See, and they had not mentioned it to help her. They had mentioned it because they were the reason she hadn't been able to address it. See, because they had calculated somehow that getting Eliza Marlowe 600 miles away from the Eastern Territory and stranded in a place with no resources and no contacts was useful to someone. See, she sat very still on the bed with 12 letters on the quilt in front of her and felt something arrive in her chest that was not quite fear and not quite anger, but was a specific combination of the two that she had learned. See, over 22 years of being a woman with limited options to pay close attention to. See, someone had not chosen her because she was easy to deceive. See, someone had chosen her because she was in the way. See, the morning came in through the east window and found her sitting in the same position, and she had been awake for all of it. See, when she heard the sound of Lenora moving in the kitchen, she rose, washed her face, changed her dress, and took the tin box with her to the kitchen table. See, Lenora was at the stove and didn't look up. You sleep at all? See, some, Eliza said. Lenora turned then and looked at her, and whatever she saw in Eliza's face made her turn fully away from the stove and give her complete attention. See, what happened? Lenora said. Eliza set the tin box on the table. See, I need to know who I can trust in this town, she said. See, not who's friendly, who I can actually trust. Lenora was quiet for a moment. See, that's a short list. I expected it would be. Eliza opened the box and took out the fourth letter and the sixth letter and placed them side by side on the table. See, someone sent me these letters to get me out of the East. See, I have property there and inheritance I never properly claimed. See, I think someone wanted me too far away and too poor to fight for it. She looked up at Lenora. See, I need to know if the lawyer who contacted me originally is still operating, and I need to know if there's anyone in Red Hollow who handles legal correspondence. See, Lenora looked at the letters and then at Eliza. Bram Keller, she said. See, the sheriff. He's honest, which isn't as common as it should be. See, and there's a man named Aldous Webb who handles legal documents. See, he's slower than you'd like, but he's careful. Can you tell me how to find them? See, I can take you to both myself. Lenora pulled out the chair across from Eliza and sat down. See, but I need you to tell me everything first, all of it. See, because whatever you've stepped into, you're in it in my house, and I don't go into things without knowing what I'm walking toward. See, Eliza looked at the woman across the table, Lenora Rourke, who had opened a door to a stranger without asking for an explanation first. See, who had said you're safe in this house as a simple statement of fact. See, who was now sitting across from her at 6 in the morning with a no-nonsense directness that expected to be met in kind. See, it's going to take a while, Eliza said. I've got coffee and no particular place to be, Lenora said. See, talk. So Eliza talked. She started with the first letter, and she didn't leave anything out, not the boarding house, not Mrs. See, Pratt's warning. Not the child who had slept against her arm on the train, not the cold clarity of standing on the platform and understanding that the man in front of her had never sent for her. See, she talked about the ledger she'd found in the office and the overcharging supplier and the phrase, whatever you are owed. And when she got to the inheritance, the great uncle she'd never met, the lawyer's letter she'd never properly followed up on, see, the land whose value she didn't even know, she put the relevant letters on the table in the order they mattered and let Lenora read them herself. See, Lenora read slowly. She turned the fourth letter over and looked at the blank back of it, then turned it over again. See, whoever wrote this knew about your inheritance before you did, Lenora said. See, before I understood what it was worth, Eliza said. See, I knew about it. I just never had the means to pursue it. See, and now someone's made sure you're 600 miles away with no means and no contacts. Lenora set the letter down. See, that's not a small operation. Writing 12 letters, maintaining a voice that reads as believable, that takes time and intelligence. See, somebody invested in this, which means what they wanted was worth the investment, Eliza said. See, Lenora was quiet for a moment. Outside, the sound of Gideon moving across the yard, the rhythmic sound of a man who starts working before the rest of the world has decided to. See, you're going to tell Gideon, Lenora said. It was not a question. See, I was going to tell you first, and then him, Eliza said. See, because I don't know him yet. But I know he's going to find out regardless, and I'd rather he find out from me directly than piece it together. See, Lenora nodded. He'll want to go straight to Keller. See, I know. You don't? I want to know more before I move, Eliza said. See, if whoever did this has contacts here in Red Hollow, near the ranch, anywhere in this territory, then going to the sheriff before I understand the full shape of it could warn them. See, I need to know what the inheritance actually is first. See, what it's worth. Who knew about it and when. Lenora looked at her for a long moment with the particular expression of a woman who has met someone operating at a level she respects but hasn't fully anticipated. See, you think like a careful person, Lenora said. I had to learn, Eliza said. See, when you don't have resources, you make do with thinking. See, the sound of boots on the porch steps. Then the back door and Gideon coming in with mud on his work boots, and the particular half-awake alertness of a man who has been outside long enough for the morning to clear his head. See, he looked at the table, at the letters spread across it. See, at his mother sitting with her coffee and her serious expression. See, at Eliza, who had apparently not slept. He pulled out a chair and sat down. See, tell me, he said. And Eliza looked at him across the table, this stranger who had given her a room without asking for anything, this man whose name had been used as a weapon against her, see, who had said, you have the eyes of someone who just got hit with information they haven't finished processing, with the flat accuracy of someone who saw clearly without trying to perform the act of seeing, and she made a decision. See, she told him everything, the same way she had told his mother from the beginning. See, without leaving out the parts that made her look foolish or naive, or like a woman who had kept a tin box of letters under a cot and taken them out at night because a stranger's words on paper had been. See, the closest thing to real company she'd had in years. See, she told him all of it. Gideon listened the way he did everything without interruption, without performance, without the particular kind of pity that diminishes the person receiving it. See, When she finished, he was quiet for what felt like a full minute, and then he picked up the fourth letter and read it again. See, whatever you are owed, he read aloud. That's the one, she said. See, he set it down. Someone knows this territory. They knew my name, my reputation, knew that a letter from Gideon Rourke would carry enough weight to convince a woman in Belhaven that the arrangement was legitimate. See, that's not a guess, that's local knowledge. That's what I was thinking, Eliza said. See, which means whoever did this may not be in Belhaven, he said. See, they may be a lot closer. The kitchen went quiet. See, Maeve appeared in the doorway from the hall, sleep-rumpled and barefoot, took one look at the three people around the table and the spread of letters, and the particular quality of the silence. See, and without a word turned around and went back to her room. See, that Eliza thought was the most tactful thing she had seen anyone do in weeks. See, I need to write to the lawyer's office, she said. See, the one that contacted me about the inheritance. I need to know what the property is, what it's worth, and whether anyone has tried to act on it in my absence. See, Aldous Webb can send the wire, Lenora said. We should also check, Gideon said, whether anyone in Red Hollow has been asking questions about Eastern landholdings. See, somebody with a connection here and an interest in Eastern property who's been patient enough to run a months-long scheme that's not a ghost. See, that's a person with a face and a name, and somebody in this town has probably seen them and not known what they were looking at. See, Eliza looked at him. You're not going straight to the sheriff. See, not yet, he met her eyes. You said you want to understand the shape of it first. See, you're right. I don't like it, but you're right. A pause. See, your instinct on this is better than mine, because you've been thinking about it longer, and I've been sleeping. See, it was as close to a compliment as he apparently got, and it landed differently than most compliments she had received, not as flattery designed to soften her or manage her, see, but as a plain acknowledgement between people trying to solve the same problem. See, thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet, he said. See, we don't know what we're dealing with. No, she agreed. See, but we know more than we did yesterday, and whoever sent those letters doesn't know that we know. See, that's the only advantage we have right now, Gideon said. See, then we'd better use it, Eliza said. See, she reached across the table and gathered the letters back into the tin box one by one carefully, in order the way she had always handled them, though the feeling with which she handled them was entirely different now. See, they were not comfort anymore. They were not a story she had told herself about a future that might have been. See, they were a map, and somewhere at the end of it was the person who had drawn it, sitting comfortably in the belief that Eliza Marlowe was exactly what they had calculated her to be, a woman alone, without resources, without allies. See, too overwhelmed by her own circumstances to look up and start asking the right questions. See, she closed the lid of the tin box. That person had made a significant error. See, Aldous Webb's office smelled like old paper and lamp oil, and the particular mustiness of a man who had been filing other people's problems for so long that the smell of documentation had become indistinguishable from the smell of the man himself. See, he was somewhere past 70, thin through the chest, with a pair of spectacles he wore pushed up on his forehead in a way that suggested he only needed them for distances shorter than arm's length. See, which raised certain questions about how much of his filing had been done accurately. See, but his hands were steady when he took Eliza's letter of inquiry and read it, and his eyes were sharp in a way that had nothing to do with the spectacles. See, Gideon had brought her into town on the Wednesday, not the Friday, because once the decision was made to move, Eliza had found waiting intolerable, and Gideon had recognized that particular quality of restlessness in her and not argued with it. See, they had told Lenora where they were going and left Maeve with strict instructions not to mention any of it to anyone who came to the ranch. See, a directive that Maeve had received with the expression of someone being trusted with something significant for the first time and intended to prove she deserved it. See, Webb read the letter twice, then set it on his desk and looked at Eliza over the rim of his displaced spectacles. See, Harlan Marlowe's estate, he said. You know it? Eliza said. See, know of it, Most legal men in this territory know of it if they've been here long enough. He tapped the edge of the letter against his desk once, twice, a thinking gesture. See, Harlan Marlowe came out here 28 years ago with a land grant and a surveyor's map, and he was one of the few men in that wave who actually read what he signed before he signed it. See, he ended up with a holding that most people didn't understand the value of until the timber market opened up about 12 years later and the grazing assessment came through. He paused. See, that land is worth considerably more than it looks on paper. See, how considerably, Gideon said. He was standing slightly behind Eliza's chair with his arms crossed, not because she needed protection, but because he was a man who stood behind things he had decided to stand behind. See, Webb took off his spectacles entirely and set them on the desk. See, the timber rights alone, at current market, would be valued at something close to $4,000. See, the grazing acreage on top of that, another $1,500 minimum. See, and there's a water access corridor along the eastern boundary that a railroad company has been sniffing around for 2 years. See, Eliza sat very still. She had understood, lying awake with those letters on her quilt, that whatever her inheritance was, it was worth enough to motivate someone to an elaborate scheme. See, she had not put a number to it. She was putting one to it now, and the number was larger than anything she had managed in her head. See, who knows about the railroad interest? She asked. See, Webb looked at her with an expression that recalibrated something in his assessment of her. See, not many people. The company has been quiet about the corridor because once word gets out, land adjacent to it jumps in price. See, they've been dealing through intermediaries. Intermediaries who would know the identity of the current heir, Eliza said. See, Webb was quiet for a moment. The inheritance passed to you when Harlan died 2 years ago. See, there is a record of that in the estate documentation. See, anyone with access to the probate records which are not sealed could identify you as the rightful heir. See, and anyone who wanted that land before you could claim it, Gideon said slowly, would need to either buy it from you, forge a transfer of ownership from you, see, or make sure you were too far away and too uninformed to press your claim before they found another angle. See, all three of which require knowing who you are and where you are, Webb said. See, and making sure I stayed uninformed, Eliza said. See, she was thinking, and the room gave her space to do it. See, Webb watched her with the patience of a man accustomed to sitting with complicated problems. See, Gideon watched the window with the alertness of a man who was now wondering whether anyone in Red Hollow had noticed their wagon outside Webb's office. See, I need you to send a wire, Eliza said finally, to the original lawyer's office that contacted me. See, I need to know whether anyone has made a claim on that property in my absence, or attempted to acquire documentation suggesting I have transferred my rights. See, I can do that today, Webb said. And I need you to tell me whether anyone in Red Hollow has come to you recently asking questions about Eastern land holdings. See, anyone unfamiliar, anyone who seemed to have more interest in the answers than their questions suggested. See, Webb was quiet for a moment that told her everything. See, there was a man, he said, about 3 months ago. See, well-dressed, Eastern manners, said he was a land speculator looking at investment opportunities in the territory. See, asked general questions, mostly supply routes, railroad talk, which holdings in the East still had unresolved inheritance questions. He picked up a pen, turned it once in his fingers. See, I told him general things because they were general questions. See, I didn't know then what I know now. What was his name? Gideon asked. See, he gave the name Preston, Edward Preston. Webb's mouth was flat. See, whether that's his name or not, I couldn't say. Eliza looked at Gideon. See, Gideon looked at Eliza. Neither of them said what they were both thinking, which was that a man who forged 12 letters in someone else's name was not a man who offered his real one to a legal clerk he was probing for information. See, describe him, Eliza said. Webb described him. Tall, dark-haired, somewhere between 35 and 45, carried himself like a man who was accustomed to being believed, and slightly impatient when the process took longer than he expected. See, good boots, watch chain, The particular ease of someone whose money was not new, but whose relationship with it was not comfortable. See, Eliza filed the description in the part of her mind where she kept things she intended to return to and stood up. See, send the wire today, she said. And please don't mention this conversation to anyone. See, I understand discretion, Miss Marlowe, Webb said dryly. See, it's most of my job. She put out her hand and he shook it, which seemed to surprise him slightly. See, and then she walked out of his office onto the main street of Red Hollow with Gideon at her shoulder and the warm late morning air hitting her face and the full weight of what she had just learned sisting in her. See, chest like a stone she had swallowed deliberately. See, $4,000 in timber, $1,500 in grazing land. See, a railroad corridor that someone had been sniffing around for 2 years. See, and a man named Edward Preston, or whatever his real name was, who had come to Red Hollow 3 months ago, right around the time the 4th letter had arrived in Belhaven, and asked very general questions in the office of a legal clerk. See, he scoped the territory first, Gideon said quietly, beside her. See, came out here, got his bearings, figured out how the inheritance was recorded and what it was worth, and then went back and wrote the letters. See, he's patient, Eliza said. Patient and organized, and he doesn't make visible mistakes. She stopped walking for a moment. See, that's the most frightening kind. Gideon stopped beside her. See, the street was busy enough that their conversation was covered by the ambient noise of a frontier town in mid-morning, a feed delivery, a dog disputing something with a woman outside the dry goods store. See, 2 men negotiating loudly over a price that neither of them was going to agree on. See, we need to tell Keller, Gideon said. Not yet. He turned to look at her. See, Eliza. It was the first time he had used her name without the miss, and she noticed it, though she didn't show that she noticed it. See, I'm not saying never, she said. I'm saying not yet. See, we still don't know what he's already done to the property documentation. See, if he's filed a fraudulent transfer, if there's any paper suggesting I willingly handed over my rights, I need to know the shape of it before Keller starts making noise that alerts anyone. See, the moment this becomes official, whoever is behind this has the opportunity to make things disappear. She looked at him steadily. See, I need Webb's wire to come back first. I need to know what the land situation actually is before I bring in someone who can't operate quietly. See, Gideon was quiet. She could see him working through it, the part of him that was a man accustomed to addressing problems directly, head-on, taking the issue to the person with authority, and letting the proper process sort it out. See, that instinct was not wrong. It was the instinct of a man who had lived his life in a place where the proper process more or less worked. See, you've had more practice than I have, he said finally, dealing with systems that don't necessarily work in your favor. See, it was such an accurate and undefended thing to say that it landed harder than she expected. See, yes, she said simply. Then we do it your way, he said. See, for now. They walked back to the wagon without further conversation, and the ride home was different from the ride into town denser, weighted with information that needed to be sorted, and a timeline that they didn't control. See, the wire to the Eastern lawyer's office would take at least 3 days to get a response, assuming the office was still operating at the same address and the right person was there to answer it. See, 3 days in which the man who had called himself Edward Preston could be anywhere still in the territory, already back east, or somewhere in between, making whatever next move he had planned. See, Eliza spent those 3 days working. See, not because the work was a distraction, though it was, but because there was genuinely more to do at Rourke Ridge than the number of people available to do it, and being useful was the only way she knew to manage the particular anxiety of waiting. See, she went through the full set of ledgers now, with Gideon's permission properly this time. See, with a pen and her own notepaper, and by the end of the 2nd day she had a full accounting of the ranch's financial situation, laid out in terms that were clear enough for anyone to read. See, the overcharging supplier was documented with dates and amounts. See, the feed cost discrepancy was annotated against 3 months of current pricing that she had collected during their Wednesday trip to town. See, The actual margin on the cattle operation, stripped of the inflated supply costs, was better than the ledgers had made it look. See, she put the finished summary on the desk in Gideon's office and left it without saying anything about it. See, he found it that evening and read it at the kitchen table while Lenora was washing up, and Maeve was pretending to mend something while actually watching her brother's face. See, he read it twice. Then he set it down. "You did this today?" he asked. See, "Yesterday and today," she said. "I wanted to check the arithmetic twice before I showed it to you." See, "The margin on the fall drive is better than I thought." See, "By about 18% once you remove the inflated costs." See, "The ranch is not struggling the way the ledgers looked," she said. See, "The ledgers were just paying for someone else's profit." See, he was quiet for a moment. "How do you want to handle the supplier?" See, "In person," she said, "with documentation and a calm voice and absolutely no uncertainty about whether you're willing to take the business elsewhere." See, "Men like that respond to precision, not anger. Anger gives them something to argue with." See, Maeve made a small sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. See, Lenora's shoulders moved in a way that could have been many things. See, Gideon looked at Eliza with the expression she was beginning to map, the one that meant he was revising something about what he'd expected. See, "All right," he said. The response from the Eastern lawyer's office arrived on the 4th day, not the 3rd. See, Webb sent a boy out to the ranch with the telegram shortly after noon, and Eliza read it, standing in the kitchen doorway with the boy still waiting for a response, and Lenora and Gideon behind her. See, the telegram was brief. The lawyer's office confirmed that Eliza was the sole heir to the Harlan Marlowe estate. See, they also confirmed that approximately 6 weeks ago, they had received documentation apparently from Eliza herself indicating that she had transferred her rights of inheritance to a man named Silas Vane. See, in consideration of a proposed marriage contract and the sum of $300. See, she had never heard the name Silas Vane in her life. See, she had never signed any transfer document. She had never received $300 from anyone. See, she read the telegram twice and then folded it very carefully and handed it to Gideon, who read it and went very still in the particular way of a man who has just confirmed that the situation is worse than he was hoping. "See, Silas Vane," he said. "I've never heard that name," she said. "See, have you?" He was quiet for a moment too long. "Gideon," Lenora said from the table. "See, I've heard the name," he said. His voice was flat in a different way than usual, not the absence of emotion, but the careful containment of it. "See, there was a man through Red Hollow about 4 years ago. See, investor type. Bought up 2 parcels of land from families who were struggling, paid under value, sold them inside a year for considerably more. See, both families later said they felt they hadn't understood what they were signing." He set the telegram on the table. See, Sheriff Keller looked into it, but there wasn't enough to act on. See, the documents were all technically legal. Technically legal, Eliza said. See, he had the right signatures. The families signed. See, whether they fully understood what they signed was a different argument and one that didn't hold up. Gideon's jaw was tight. See, he left the territory, and I haven't heard the name since. See, I didn't connect it to the description Webb gave us. See, Edward Preston, Eliza said. Different names, same method. He looked at her. See, same patience, same attention to paperwork. She sat down at the table. See, the full shape of it was visible now, the way a thing in fog becomes clear as you walk toward it, not all at once, but piece by piece, and then suddenly you are close enough to see the whole thing, and it is larger than you prepared for. See, Silas Vane had identified the Marlowe inheritance. See, had researched it thoroughly enough to know its value, to know the railroad interest, to know that the heir was a young woman alone in an eastern town, with no money and no legal representation and no family to advise her. See, he had come to Red Hollow, scoped the territory under the name Preston, confirmed what the land was worth, and confirmed that Gideon Rourke's name carried enough local weight to make a mail-order correspondence credible. See, then he had gone east, or hired someone who went east, and spent 4 months constructing a persona convincing enough to get Eliza on a westbound train. See, While she was on that train, he had filed a forged transfer document with the lawyer's office, using a forged signature and a fabricated marriage contract, claiming she had willingly surrendered her inheritance for the sum of $300. See, by the time she arrived in Red Hollow stranded, resourceless, confused, the paper would have been in motion. See, and a stranded, resourceless, confused woman with no legal representation and no knowledge of what she owned was in no position to contest anything. See, except that she had kept the letters, except that she had not crumpled on the platform and wept herself into inaction. See, except that she had gotten into Gideon Rourke's wagon, not as a defeated woman accepting charity, but as a person already beginning to think about what had actually happened and why. See, we need to contact the lawyer's office, she said. See, tell them the transfer is fraudulent, that I never signed anything and the signature is forged. See, Webb can draft the response today, Lenora said. She had been sitting quietly through all of it with the particular stillness of a woman who processes things internally before she speaks. See, but you'll need witnesses to your presence here. Proof that you arrived in Red Hollow before that trimmer was filed, that you couldn't have been in the East signing documents when someone was signing them in your name. See, the station master, Gideon said. He'll have a record of the manifest for the evening train. See, your name would be on it, and the date. That's part of it, Eliza said. See, but the forged transfer will have a date on it. We need to know whether that date is before or after my arrival here, and we need to know whether it was filed through someone local or whether Vane had a contact at the lawyer's office itself. See, you think someone at the office is involved? Gideon asked. See, I think a forged document doesn't get filed without someone on the inside looking the other way, Eliza said. See, whether they were paid or just careless, it doesn't matter, someone accepted that document without proper verification. See, that's either corruption or negligence, and either way, it's a weakness in his chain. See, she looked at the telegram lying on the table, $300. See, that was what Silas Vane had written as the consideration for her inheritance. See, $4,000 in timber, $1,500 in grazing land, a railroad corridor worth potentially far more than either, and the number he had written in the transfer document was $300. See, that number was not carelessness. That number was contempt. See, he had valued her ability to understand what she owned at zero and priced her accordingly. See, she felt the anger arrive and she let it sit in her chest without letting it out, because anger spent in the room was anger wasted, and she needed every bit of it later. See, I want to see Keller, she said. Gideon looked at her. See now. Now, today. Not because I've changed my thinking about moving too fast, I haven't. See, but because we now have documentation of a forged transfer filed in my name for property I legally own, and that is not a thing I can address without legal authority. She looked at him steadily. See, you were right that we needed to go to Keller. I was right that we needed information first. See, we have it now. Both things were true at the right time. See, something in his face shifted, not relief exactly, but the particular ease of a man who has been trying to respect someone else's instinct against his own and has just been told he doesn't have to choose. See, I'll get the wagon, he said. Lenora put her hand briefly on Eliza's shoulder as she passed, not a pat, not comfort. See, just a solid, brief contact that meant something without needing to name itself, and then went to send the boy back to Webb with a message that they'd be coming in. See, Sheriff Bram Keller had the kind of face that had probably looked 50 years old when it was 35, and had not changed much since. See, he was a compact man, not heavy but dense, and he kept his office in a condition that suggested someone who disliked mess, but lacked the time to address it properly organized in the important areas, chaotic in the peripheral ones. See, he had a deputy who was younger than his hat looked, and a file cabinet with a lock that had been broken and repaired and broken again. See, he listened to Eliza for 45 minutes without interrupting. See, she laid it out in the order of events rather than the order in which she discovered them, because that was clearer, and she put the letters and the telegram on his desk in sequence so he could follow the documentation as she spoke. See, When she finished, he was quiet, looking at the papers. See, Silas Vane, he said. You know the name, she said. See, not a question. I know it. He looked up. He was through here 4 years ago. See, couple of land deals that smelled wrong, but I couldn't pin anything to. See, he's been operating in 2 or 3 other territories since I've had correspondence from sheriffs in both. See, same pattern, different names, same method. He picked up the telegram. See, this is the first time I've had documentation of a forged transfer. See, it's in my name, Eliza said. I want it on record that I never signed it, and I never received any money from anyone named Silas Vane or Edward Preston or any other name he's used. See, we'll get that on record, Keller said. He looked at Gideon. See, you'd have had no knowledge of this scheme. I had no knowledge of any of it, Gideon said. See, Miss Marlowe arrived on my platform with letters bearing my name. See, I have never corresponded with her, and I did not advertise for a bride. See, that can be attested. I'll need statements from both of you. Keller set the telegram down with the particular carefulness of a man handling something he considers useful. See, and I need to know whether Vane is still in the territory. See, we don't know, Eliza said. The man Webb described came through Red Hollow 3 months ago. See, we don't know where he went after that. See, if the forged transfer was filed 6 weeks ago, Keller said slowly, and the document would have needed a witness and a notary, even a corrupt one that takes physical presence or a very reliable contact. He looked at the letters again. See, he may still be close. Men like this don't invest 4 months of work in something and then stand far back when it comes time to collect. See, Eliza had thought the same thing. She had thought it every day for the past 4 days without saying it aloud, because saying it aloud made it a different kind of real. See if he comes here, she said, to Red Hollow, to the ranch. See, what do we do? You send for me, Keller said, before he comes or after. See, Keller looked at her. You think you can predict when he's coming? See, I think, Eliza said carefully, that if the forged transfer has been filed and is being processed, and he believes I'm stranded and uninformed, he'll want to present himself in person at some point. See, to consolidate, to make sure the loose end is tied, she paused. See, he'll want to see the woman whose name he signed. See, either to verify she's compliant or to deal with her if she isn't. See, the room was quiet for a moment. That's a reasonable reading of his pattern, Keller said. See, if he comes to the ranch, Eliza said, I want to be the one to meet him. See, with documentation ready, and you somewhere he can't see until I've let him speak. See, Keller looked at Gideon. Gideon looked at Eliza. That puts you in a position of direct risk, Keller said. See, I've been in a position of direct risk since I stepped off that train, she said. See, the difference is that now I understand the risk, and I can choose what to do with it. She kept her voice level. See, I'm not asking you to let me handle it alone. I'm asking you to let me handle the part I'm better positioned to handle. See, you handle the rest. Keller picked up the telegram again and turned it in his hands. See, she could see him working through the same calculation. She had already run the risks of letting a civilian take point on a confrontation with a man who had been running sophisticated land fraud across 3 territories. See, against the practical reality that Eliza Marlowe was the one person Silas Vane was coming to see, and her presence and apparent unawareness were the one advantage over a very patient and intelligent man. See, you'd need to have everything organized, Keller said finally. See, every document, every letter, everything that demonstrates the fraud. See, in order, accessible, ready to produce. I've been organizing it for 10 days, she said. See, another look at Gideon. Gideon's face said, I know. See, I've seen the ledgers. Don't underestimate her. All right, Keller said. See, here's how we do it. They spent another hour at Keller's desk, laying out the specifics how to get word to the ranch when there was any sign of Vane's presence in the territory, how Keller would position himself. See, what signal Eliza would give, what protections they'd have in place. See, Gideon argued for 2 of them from the start, not Keller alone, and Keller agreed without debate, because he was a practical man and he had read the situation correctly. See, when they came out of the sheriff's office, the afternoon sun was sliding west, and the main street of Red Hollow had taken on the particular late-day quality of a place winding down from its noisiest hours. See, the feed store had closed. The two arguing men were gone. See, the dog was gone. The woman with the basket was gone. See, Eliza stood on the boardwalk outside Keller's office and looked at the street and breathed the dry afternoon air. See, you all right? Gideon said beside her. She thought about it honestly. See, no, she said, but I'm functional, which is what matters right now. See, he made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, but acknowledged the distinction. See, he's going to come, she said, not asking, stating. See, yes, Gideon said, and we're going to be ready. See, yes. She looked at the street a moment longer, a town she'd known for 10 days. See, a man she'd known for the same, a family she hadn't expected and hadn't known how badly she needed. See, a piece of land far away that had a value she'd never known about, that someone had staked her entire future on stealing. See, I'm not going to let him take it, she said. See, her voice was quiet and certain, and it had nothing of desperation in it, not the certainty of someone who needs to believe something, but the certainty of a woman who has already decided and is now simply waiting for the circumstances to catch up. See, Gideon looked at her sideways. Didn't figure you would. See, good, she said. She stepped off the boardwalk toward the wagon. See, behind her, the sheriff's office door was already closed, and Bram Kettler was already at his desk writing the first of the dispatches that would go out to surrounding territories. See, searching for confirmed sightings of a man who went by several names and one consistent method, and who was almost certainly moving patient, organized, see, and entirely unaware that the woman he'd written off as an easy mark had spent the last 10 days becoming something he hadn't planned on. See, the wagon rolled out of Red Hollow as the light turned gold and thin, and Eliza sat with her hands in her lap and her back straight and thought about all the things she needed to do before Silas Vane arrived at Rourke Ridge. See, there was a great deal to organize. She had always been good at organizing. See, she reached into her coat pocket and touched the edge of the tin box she'd taken to carrying with her whenever she left the ranch, and the feel of it solid, real, see, containing every letter that was about to become the most important document of her life, steadied something in her chest that had been unsettled since the moment she stepped off the train. See, the road back to Rourke Ridge was the same road it had always been. See, the same dust, the same dry grass at the edges, the same darkening hills in the distance. See, but it felt different now, rolling under the wheels in the late afternoon. See, it felt like a road she had chosen. The waiting was the hardest part. See, not the danger itself. Eliza had made her peace with the danger in the way that people make peace with things they cannot avoid. See, which is to say imperfectly and with significant effort, but the particular suspension of waiting for something you know is coming without knowing exactly when. See, it had a texture to it, that waiting. It pressed on everything. See, she channeled it the only way she knew how. See, in the 2 weeks following their meeting with Keller, Eliza organized every document she possessed into a sequence so precise that she could produce any individual piece in under 30 seconds in any lighting condition. See, the 12 letters were arranged chronologically with the relevant passages marked in pencil, not underlined, because she didn't want to damage them, but with a small, precise dot in the margin beside each line that mattered. See, the telegram from the lawyer's office was copied twice in her own hand, the copies dated and initialed, the original wrapped in oilcloth. See, her written statement to Keller, attesting that she had never signed any transfer document and had never received money from anyone named Silas Vane, was countersigned by Webb and filed with the sheriff's office, with a copy in her possession. See, she also wrote a detailed account of everything: the letters, the train, the arrival, the discovery, the forged transfer in plain language on 6 pages of notepaper, signed and dated at the bottom of each page, witnessed by Lenora and Maeve. See, not because it was legally necessary, because she had lived long enough in circumstances where a woman's word was considered insufficient, that she had learned to make her word into a physical object whenever possible. See, Gideon watched her do all of this without comment for the first 4 days. And then on the fifth day, he came into the kitchen where she was working at the table and sat down across from her and said, "You've done this before." See, she looked up. Done what? Built a case. Documented everything. See, anticipated what someone else would question. He wasn't accusing her of anything. See, he was trying to understand something. This isn't the first time someone's tried to take something from you. See, she was quiet for a moment. Not property, she said finally. See, but women in my situation, working situations, no family, no resources, there are men who make a habit of it. See, taking things, credit, wages, references, things that aren't property but are just as necessary. She smoothed the edge of the paper in front of her. See, you learn to document. You learn that the only protection you reliably have is the paper trail you build yourself, because no one else is building it for you. See, he sat with that for a moment. "I'm sorry," he said. See, not in the way people say it to be polite. In the way a person says it when they have just understood something they should have already understood and feel the weight of having not understood it sooner. See, you don't need to apologize for things you didn't do, she said. See, no, he said, but I can be sorry they happened. See, she looked at him across the table. In the weeks she had been at Rourke Ridge, she had developed a fairly complete understanding of Gideon Rourke, not the version she had constructed from forged letters. See, which had been a fiction so seamlessly written that she still sometimes caught herself measuring the real man against it, but the actual man. See, the one who got up before first light and didn't make conversation about it. See, who argued with his mother exactly as much as necessary and never more. See, who was patient with the animals in a way he wasn't always patient with people, and patient with people in a way he wasn't always patient with himself. See, who had taken a stranger off a train platform and into his home, not because he was sentimental, but because he had decided it was the right thing to do, and who had not once used that fact as leverage over her. See, she had been looking for flaws in him the way she looked for accounting errors, methodically, without prejudice, because a man who seemed too right in the early days was usually hiding something that revealed itself later. See, what she had found was more complicated than flaws and more honest. See, she had found a man who was stubborn past the point of usefulness on certain subjects, who carried the financial weight of the ranch as a personal failure when it wasn't. See, who had a deep-seated difficulty asking anyone for help that went back further than she had information for, who sometimes said the correct thing and then immediately looked like he wished he hadn't said it. See, as though honesty was a reflex he was perpetually embarrassed by. See, not a perfect man, not even a particularly easy man. See, but a real one. When this is over, he said, you'll have the inheritance. See, secured, legally confirmed. You'll be able to go anywhere. See, yes, she said. I want you to know that I mean that. He was looking at the table rather than at her, which she had noticed was the position he adopted when he was being most direct about something. See, whatever you decide after this where you go, what you do with the land that's yours to decide. See, nobody at Rourke Ridge is going to hold what we did for you over your head. See, that's not what this is. She understood what he was doing. See, he was removing the obligation explicitly and in advance so that she would not feel trapped by gratitude. See, it was a thoughtful thing to do, and it cost him something to do it, because she was fairly certain it was not the outcome he would choose for himself. And he was offering it anyway because he considered her freedom more important than his preference. See, she folded the paper she'd been working on and set it aside. See, Gideon, she said. He looked up. I know, she said. See, I know what this is and what it isn't, and I know what you're doing and why. She met his eyes. See, when this is over, I will make my own choices. That is the only answer I can give you right now, and it's an honest one. See, he nodded once, in the way of a man accepting something he'd known was coming and had prepared himself for. See, then he stood up. I'm going to check the north fence. See, we had a calf get loose yesterday. Gideon, he stopped. See, thank you, she said, for saying it the way you said it. See, he stood in the doorway for a moment without answering, and then he went out to the north fence, and Eliza went back to her papers. See, and both of them held the thing that had just been said in the room between them without doing anything further with it, because this was not the time. See, Keller sent word on the 17th day. A man matching Vane's description had been seen at a hotel in Caulfield, the next town east along the rail line. See, he had registered under the name Whitmore, had asked the hotel clerk about road conditions to Red Hollow, see, and had sent 2 telegrams from the Caulfield office, the destinations of which Keller had been unable to confirm yet. But the fact of their existence was enough. See, he was coming. The message arrived at mid-morning, and Eliza read it twice at the kitchen table and then folded it into the tin box with the other documents, and sat very still for approximately 90 seconds, see, which was all she allowed herself, and then stood up and went to find Gideon. See, she found him in the barn, see, which had become in the past weeks the room most associated with the serious conversations, not by design, but because it was where he worked, and she had taken to coming to him where he was, rather than waiting for him to come to the house. See, he's at Caulfield, she said. Gideon set down what he was holding. See, his face did the thing it did when he was processing information, perfectly still on the outside, clearly active underneath. See, how long to Red Hollow from Caulfield by wagon, she asked. See, 4 hours. 5 if the road's bad. So he could be here tomorrow. See, or the day after. Yes, I need to send word to Keller to position himself. See, we agreed on the Miller property. It's close enough to the ranch that he can get here in 15 minutes once I send the signal. See, I'll ride to town and send the message myself, Gideon said. See, faster than waiting for a boy. She nodded. Then, I need you to understand something before you go. See, he waited. When he arrives, if he arrives here, which I believe he will, I need you to let me speak first. See, I need you to be on that porch, and I need Vane to see that you're there, but I need to be the one he has to answer to. She held his eyes. See, I know that goes against everything you're inclined to do. See, I'm asking you to do it anyway. Why? Because he came for me. See, not for the ranch, not for your name he used your name, but I am the one he targeted. See, I am the one whose signature he forged. The case against him is built from my property and my letters and my testimony, and if you step in front of it, you hand him the ability to reframe what happened. See, to suggest it's a dispute between men over a woman's property rather than what it actually is. She kept her voice steady and clear. See, let me be the one he has to face. Let the thing he tried to take from me be the thing that takes him down. See, Gideon looked at her for a long moment. She could see the conflict in him, not doubt about her capability. She was fairly sure of that by now. But the deep-seated physical instinct of a man who protects what is his, see, fighting with the equally deep understanding that the whole point was that she was not his to protect in that sense. See, if he makes any move toward you, he said, then you do whatever you need to do, she said. See, I'm not asking you to stand there if it becomes dangerous. See, I'm asking you to let me lead until it does. And if I think it's becoming dangerous before you do, see, then use your judgment, she said. I trust it. That appeared to be the right thing to say, because he unclenched slightly, in a way that was visible only if you knew what to look for. See, all right, he said. He rode to town and she went back to the house and told Lenora and Maeve. See, Lenora received the news with the same quality of stillness. She brought to everything not the stillness of a person suppressing fear, but the stillness of a person deciding what the fear was going to be allowed to do. See, Maeve goes to the Hendersons when he arrives, Lenora said. See, no, Maeve said immediately. Yes, Lenora said, not because you can't handle it. See, because I need to be focused on Eliza, and I can't do that if I'm thinking about you. See, Maeve's mouth tightened. She was 17, and she had the particular 17-year-old certainty that being excluded from something was the same as being considered inadequate for it. See, if something goes wrong, Eliza said to her carefully, I need someone Keller trusts to be able to ride to him quickly. See, someone who knows the back road to the Miller property. She watched Maeve's face. See, you know that road. A pause, I know it, Maeve said. See, then you're not sitting at the Hendersons being kept safe, Eliza said. See, you're positioned where you need to be, in case we need you. See, Maeve looked at her for a moment with an expression that was too complicated for 17 gratitude and seriousness and the weight of being trusted with something real. And then she nodded. See, Lenora caught Eliza's eye over Maeve's shoulder, and something passed between them that didn't need words. See, the next day passed without incident. Eliza went through her documents 3 more times, not because they needed checking, but because the act of checking them steadied her hands. See, she ate dinner. She slept fitfully and woke before the light and lay in the dark listening to the ranch and thinking about what she was going to say when she said it. See, the black carriage came up the road mid-morning on the 2nd day. See, she saw it from the kitchen window first, the dark shape of it moving through the dust on the road that led from the main track to the ranch entrance. See, a hired carriage, well-maintained, drawn by 2 matched horses that were better animals than the average working man could afford. See, she went to the back room and collected the tin box and the full document folio. She had prepared 12 letters, the telegram, the copies of her statement, Webb's notarized confirmation, and 3 pages of written accounting showing the discrepancies between the forged transfer date and the documented evidence of her presence in Red Hollow. See, she put them in order and wrapped them in the oilcloth binding she had made for them and came back to the kitchen. See, he's here, she said. Lenora looked at the window. See, her face was composed with the effort of composure rather than its absence. See, Maeve was already at the back door with her coat on. See, wait until you see him at the porch, Eliza said to her. See, then take the back trail. Give Keller 20 minutes from when the carriage stops. See, 20 minutes, Maeve repeated. If I need him sooner, I'll get word somehow, Eliza said. See, but give it 20 minutes first. Maeve nodded and slipped out the back and was gone. See, Eliza looked at Lenora. If this goes wrong, Eliza started. See, it won't, Lenora said, but if it does, I know what to do, Lenora said. See, don't talk yourself into the bad version before you've tried the good one. See, Eliza put the folio under her arm and walked to the front door and opened it. See, Gideon was already on the porch. He had positioned himself to the right of the door, shoulder against the post, in the way of a man who is present without being in front, visible, solid, but not leading. See, he had clearly thought about it before she'd asked him to. See, she registered this and filed it without comment. The carriage had stopped at the foot of the porch steps. See, the driver stayed on his seat. The door opened. Silas Vane stepped down. See, Webb's description had been accurate as far as it went: tall, dark-haired, well-dressed, the kind of ease about him that came from years of entering rooms and being believed. See, he was perhaps 40, with a face that had been arranged over time into an expression of thoughtful pleasantness that sat on top of something else entirely, the way a good paint job sits on a wall with the wrong foundation. See, he looked at Gideon first, then he looked at Eliza. See, and something happened in his face so brief she would have missed it if she hadn't been watching for exactly that moment, a recalibration. See, he had expected to see something in her face, and he was not seeing it. See, he had expected fear or confusion or the look of a woman who has been waiting for 3 weeks in a state of increasing helplessness. See, what he saw instead was a woman standing in a doorway with a folio under her arm and an expression that told him nothing. See, she watched him decide this was manageable and watched him put the pleasant face back on, and she filed all of it. See, Miss Marlowe, he said, and his voice was warm and cultivated and had the practiced regret of a man who has delivered difficult news professionally for years. See, I'm relieved to find you here. I've been very concerned. See, Mr. Vane, she said, a slight hesitation. I see my name precedes me. See, come up to the porch, she said. There are some things we need to discuss. See, he mounted the porch steps with the ease of a man who expects to control any room he enters, and she took note of the fact that he did not look at Gideon again, after that first assessment had decided apparently, see, that Gideon was a local inconvenience rather than a factor. See, that was his second significant error. The first had been undervaluing the woman in front of him. See, I understand you've been through a disorienting experience, Vane said when he reached the porch. See, his voice had the quality of a man speaking to someone he considers not quite at his level. See, arriving in a strange territory on the basis of a misunderstanding. See, I want to assure you that I had nothing to do with whatever confusion brought you out here. See, I am here on an entirely separate matter related to your inheritance. See, I know why you're here, she said. The inheritance is a complicated matter, and I think if we discuss it calmly. See, I have documentation, she said, showing that a transfer of my inheritance rights was filed with the Eastern Lawyer's Office 6 weeks ago in my name for the sum of $300. See, to a man named Silas Vane. She held the folio but did not open it yet. See, I have documentation showing that the signature on that transfer is not mine. See, I have documentation showing that on the date that transfer was filed, I was present in Red Hollow, which is 600 miles from where that document was signed, as attested by the station manifest and 3 witness statements. She paused. See, I also have 12 letters written in the name of Gideon Rourke, who is standing behind me and who will attest that he wrote none of them. See, and I have the testimony of Aldous Webb, legal clerk of Red Hollow. See, confirming that a man matching your description came to this territory 3 months ago under the name Edward Preston and asked specific questions about unresolved Eastern inheritance cases. See, the pleasant face did not collapse. She gave him credit for that he was too experienced for it to collapse all at once. See, it shifted the way a building shifts before it falls, a subtle redistribution of weight. See, that's quite a presentation, he said. I've had time to prepare it, she said. See, Miss Marlowe. The warmth dropped by a degree. I think you've been given some inaccurate information about the nature of the transaction. See, the transfer was entirely legitimate. You signed those documents yourself in the presence of a notary and received. See, $300, she said, which I never received. See, which no record shows me having received, which no bank account in my name contains any trace of. She opened the folio now and took out the relevant pages and held them at an angle he could see. See, you're welcome to attempt that argument in front of Sheriff Bram Keller, who should be arriving in approximately. She glanced past Vane to the road. See, where she could see in the distance the particular rise of dust that a horse at pace creates 8 minutes. See, the shift in Vane's face was faster this time. See, the pleasantness was gone now, and what was underneath it was what she had known was underneath it the look of a man calculating, rapidly and without the buffer of charm, whether there is still a play available. See, you planned this. Yes, she said. See, you're going to tell me this was your idea, he said, and there was something in his voice now that was closer to the real thing, not quite respect, but the involuntary acknowledgement that something has not gone as planned. See, not the ranchers. This is my evidence, she said. See, my property, my name on a forged document, my 12 letters from a man who never wrote them. She kept her eyes on his face. See, you chose me because you thought I had nothing and no one. See, you were partly right, but you forgot something. What did I forget? He said. See, that a woman who has had nothing for most of her life is very practiced at making something from it. See, Vane looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Gideon, who had not moved from the post where he'd been standing, who had kept his word completely present, visible. See, silent, and whose expression was the expression of a man who has watched someone he trusts do exactly what they said they were going to do, and is experiencing, with some effort, the satisfaction of having been right to trust them. See, then Vane looked back at Eliza, and she saw him make the decision. See, and it happened before she had fully registered it. He stepped forward, and his hand came up and went toward her arm with the intention of someone who has decided that if the legal argument is gone, the physical one is still available. See, who had calculated that a woman with papers was still a woman and could still be moved. See, Gideon moved, not toward Eliza, between them. He stepped into the space between her and Vane's reaching hand with a speed that was not dramatic and did not need to be. See, the way a door closes when the wind changes simply and with finality, and Vane's hand met the flat of Gideon's forearm and stopped. See, Gideon didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He just stayed there in that space and looked at Vane with the specific patience of a man who will wait as long as necessary for someone to make a better decision. See, Vane looked at the arm and at the man attached to it, and at the distance between himself and his carriage and the driver who was not going to be useful in this situation. See, and at the rising dust down the road that was now close enough to resolve into the shape of two horses with riders. See, he stepped back. Not because he had given up she could see that. See, he had simply revised the timeline. Men like this always revise the timeline. See, they were patient, and they were flexible, and they did not abandon something they had invested in simply because the first approach had failed. See, that was the part she needed Keller for. Keller arrived with his deputy 2 minutes after that, not 8, because Maeve had ridden faster than anyone had told her to, and Keller had come faster than expected. See, which told Eliza something about Bram Keller's judgment of urgency, and the situation on the porch was immediately apparent to a man who had been in law enforcement long enough to read a confrontation by its aftermath. See, Vane was standing to one side of the porch. Eliza was standing with the folio in her hands, and Gideon was standing between them, and nothing was broken or bleeding, but the air had the quality of something that had recently been. See, Keller dismounted and came up the porch steps and looked at Vane with the particular expression of a man who has been waiting 4 years to have an occasion to look at someone this way. See, Silas Vane, he said. Vane's face did the thing that faces do when a name is used by a person with legal authority and the person named has no remaining pretense to hide behind. See, it simply stopped performing. Sheriff, Vane said. See, I have a warrant, Keller said. He reached into his coat and produced the folded paper with the ease of a man who has been carrying it carefully and has been waiting for the right moment to present it. See, fraud, forgery of a legal document, and fraudulent transfer of real property. See, you want to read it here or in the wagon. Vane looked at the warrant. See, he looked at Eliza. He looked at Gideon. He looked at the 2 horses and the deputy and the ranch around them, and the document folio in Eliza's hands, and the expression on Keller's face, which offered no flexibility whatsoever. See, I'll read it in the wagon, he said quietly. That was how it ended on the porch of Rourke Ridge, not with shouting, not with anything that Eliza would remember as dramatic, because the truth was that the drama had been in the preparation. See, and by the time Vane arrived, the outcome had already been decided. See, the moment on the porch was simply the moment the decision became visible. See, Keller put the cuffs on Vane at the foot of the porch steps, and the deputy took his arm and walked him to the wagon. See, and the driver of the hired carriage sat us on his seat and said nothing, and clearly intended to go on saying nothing until he was a very long distance from Red Hollow. See, Keller looked back up at Eliza. The documentation, he said. See, she came down the porch steps and handed him the folio. See, everything is in order, she said. Dated, witnessed, annotated. See, he took it and looked at the first page and then closed it. See, I'll need you in town tomorrow. There'll be a formal statement. See, I'll be there, she said. He nodded, and then he looked at Gideon, and something passed between the 2 men, not quite an apology from Keller for the 4 years ago that he hadn't been able to do more. See, and not quite an acknowledgement from Gideon, but something in that neighborhood. See, then Keller went to his horse, and the wagon with Vane in it turned on the road, and the deputy followed, and the dust rose and settled, and the ranch was quiet. See, Eliza stood at the foot of the porch steps and watched the wagon until she couldn't see it anymore. See, behind her she heard the back door open and Maeve's footsteps running, and then Maeve was past her and asking Gideon something in a breathless rush of questions. See, and Lenora appeared at the front door with her arms folded and her expression doing several things at once. See, Eliza stood in the yard in the late morning light and felt the thing she had been holding for 17 days begin to release, carefully. See, the way you release something you've been gripping so hard, you're not sure your hand will work properly afterward. See, she was shaking slightly, and she was going to cry in approximately 4 minutes, and she intended to do that privately in the spare room before anyone could attach significance to it. See, the crying was not grief, and it was not relief exactly. It was the physical consequence of 17 days of sustained pressure finally having somewhere to go, and it was nobody's business but hers. See, she pressed the back of her hand against her mouth for a moment and looked at the empty road. See, her property was still legally hers. The forged transfer would be challenged and overturned. See, Vane would face charges in a jurisdiction with documentation solid enough to hold him, and Keller had mentioned the sheriffs in 2 other territories who had been waiting for something exactly like this. See, the chain of evidence she had built in 10 days of sleepless, careful work was going to follow Silas Vane for a very long time. See, she had done that. Not with power or money or connections or any of the things that women in her position were supposed to need in order to fight. See, with a tin box. With 12 letters she had refused to throw away. See, with the particular hard-won skill of a woman who had spent her entire life in circumstances where the only protection she had was the protection she built herself. See, she turned around and looked at the house, at the porch with the spot where Gideon had been standing. See, at the kitchen window where Lenora had been watching. See, at the girl who was currently telling her brother in a very rapid voice exactly how fast she had ridden and expecting to be acknowledged for it. See, she allowed herself just briefly to feel what she felt. See, then she put it away and went to wash her face and came back to the kitchen where Lenora had already put the kettle on. See, because Lenora was a woman who understood that the appropriate response to a crisis having passed was to give everyone something warm and normal to do with their hands. See, Maeve was still talking. Gideon was listening with the patience of an older sibling who has learned that the fastest way to end a story is to let it finish. See, he looked up when Eliza came back in. He didn't say anything. See, neither did she. But something moved between them in the look not settled, not finished, not anything that could be called concluded but present and real and belonging to both of them equally. See, Lenora handed Eliza a cup. "Sit down," she said. Eliza sat down. See, outside the road was empty and the dust had settled back to ordinary, and the ranch went on around them the way ranches do, indifferent to the drama of the people it housed, steady and demanding and entirely real. See, the formal statement took most of the following morning. See, Eliza sat across from Keller in his office with the deputy taking notes in the corner and went through everything in sequence. The first letter, the last letter, the train, the platform, the tin box, the telegram, the forged transfer. See, the confrontation on the porch with the same precision she had brought to the document preparation, neither understating nor embellishing. See, because she understood that the value of testimony is its accuracy, and that any deviation from the plain truth, even toward drama, gives a defense attorney somewhere to stand. See, Keller was a good interviewer. He asked questions that clarified without leading, and when she said something he wanted more detail on, he simply waited, which was more effective than pressing. See, by the time she finished, the deputy had filled 11 pages, and his hand was cramped, and Keller had the expression of a man who has just received a gift he has been waiting 4 years for. See, Vane's been charged in 2 other territories now, Keller said when she was done. See, the documentation you've provided ties the method together across all 3 cases. See, Webb's notarized confirmation of the Preston identity, the train manifest placing you in Red Hollow before the transfer was filed, those are the pieces the other sheriffs were missing. He set down his pen. See, you built a better case against him than most trained investigators would have. See, I had more reason to, she said. That's true, he said simply, without the particular condescension of someone explaining that her personal motivation made her result less legitimate. See, she appreciated that. She was tired enough that small things landed with more weight than usual. See, Gideon had come into town with her, but had left her to the statement without hovering. See, which she had also appreciated. He had gone to the feed store to address the overcharging supplier in the direct way he had apparently been waiting for an excuse to address. See, armed with 3 months of documented discrepancies, and the particular flat patience of a man who does not need to raise his voice because he never leaves you in doubt that he means what he says. See, she found him afterward outside Webb's office with a receipt showing the supplier had agreed to retroactive correction of the overcharge and a new price agreement going forward. See, and she looked at the receipt and at his face and felt something that was inconveniently close to admiration. See, you didn't even have to threaten them, she said. See, no, he said. Just showed them the numbers. Numbers don't negotiate. See, that's what I've been saying for years, she said. See, he looked at her sideways, and she thought she saw the beginning of something that might have been a smile, except that Gideon Rourke's face apparently considered full smiles an extravagance and rationed them accordingly. See, the response from the Eastern lawyer's office came the following week. See, it confirmed that the forged transfer document had been flagged as under dispute, that no transaction had been completed pending investigation, and that Eliza's counterclaim, supported by the documentation she had sent via web, had been received and was being processed. The notary who had supposedly witnessed the transfer had been contacted and could not, upon inquiry, produce a satisfactory account of the transaction. A separate investigation into the notary's professional conduct was now underway. Webb read this to her in his office, with the spectacles finally in the right place on his face, and when he finished, he set the letter down and folded his hands on his desk. The inheritance is yours, he said. The process will take another several weeks to finalize formally, but the claim is uncontested now that the fraudulent transfer has been voided. No one else has standing. She sat with that for a moment. The timber rights, the grazing land, the railroad corridor that had started all of this, the piece of land along the eastern boundary that the railroad company had been quietly interested in for 2 years, which had made a dead man's modest western holding worth enough to motivate a sophisticated criminal to run a months-long scheme against a boarding house worker from a town most people had never heard of. What's the value of the full estate at current assessment? She asked. Webb told her. She sat with that for a different kind of moment. It was more than she had let herself think about. She had known the numbers Webb had told her in their first meeting, but knowing numbers and understanding what they mean for your actual life are two entirely different cognitive events. And the second one was happening to her now in Webb's cluttered office, with the lamp oil smell and the repaired file cabinet. The railroad company has made a formal inquiry through their representative, Webb continued. They're interested in acquiring the corridor easement. Not the land itself, just the right-of-way. The offer they've put forward is, he consulted his notes, substantial. But you are under no obligation to take it, and I would advise that before you make any decision on that front, you take time to understand your options fully. I won't be making any quick decisions, she said. Good, he said. That's the right instinct. She walked out of Webb's office into the Red Hollow Main Street with the weight of the things she now owned pressing on her in a way that was not unpleasant but was genuinely unfamiliar. Because Eliza Marlowe had spent her entire adult life in a condition of careful scarcity, and the shift to the opposite condition did not happen cleanly or all at once. It happened in awkward pieces, and the pieces didn't always fit with each other, and some mornings she still woke in the spare room at Rourke Ridge, calculating whether she could afford to stay. She was standing outside Webb's office, adjusting to this, when she became aware that Maeve was sitting on the edge of the water trough across the street, watching her with the focused attention of someone who has been waiting, and is trying to decide whether the waiting is over. Eliza crossed the street. Your mother sent you? She asked. No, Maeve said. I came on my own. I wanted to know what happened with the lawyer. The inheritance is mine, Eliza said. Maeve's face went through several things in quick succession, ending at something that was not just happiness for Eliza, but something more complicated relief. And the slight grief of someone who has just been reminded that a person they care about now has choices that may not include staying. She was 17, and she was not good at hiding any of this, which Eliza had come to find genuinely touching. Does that mean you'll go back east? Maeve asked. I don't know yet, Eliza said. Gideon didn't ask you to stay. See, I know. He won't, Maeve said, with the particular directness of a younger sister who has observed her brother's character with both admiration and exasperation for all of her conscious life. See, he'll think it's not his place to ask, because you have your own money now and your own land, and he'll decide that asking is the same as pressuring, and he'll probably say nothing for so long that you'll think he doesn't want you to. See, Eliza looked at her. I'm just explaining his methods, Maeve said. See, I'm not telling you what to do. I know what you're doing, Eliza said. See, is it working? Get off the water trough, Eliza said. See, we're going home. Maeve got off the water trough with the energy of someone who has decided that the answer she didn't receive was probably the answer she was hoping for, and Eliza decided not to correct this interpretation. See, mostly because she was not entirely sure it was wrong. See, the weeks that followed were a different kind of complicated. See, the legal process moved at the pace legal processes move, which is to say with great deliberateness and no concern whatsoever for the emotional state of the people waiting on it. See, and Eliza used that time the way she had used the time before Vane arrived working, thinking, not making any decisions until she had enough information to make them well. See, she wrote to the Eastern Railroad Company representative through Webb and asked for a full accounting of their corridor, interest, what specifically they wanted, what the easement would mean for the land itself. See, what restrictions they intended to place on access, and what their timeline looked like. See, the response came back in 10 days, and it was thorough, which she took as evidence that the company was serious and that they had correctly identified her as someone who would read the details. See, she read the details 3 times. Then she wrote back with 6 questions. See, Gideon watched this process from a respectful distance that she understood was costing him something, because he was a man who had opinions about things and kept them to himself on this subject with visible effort. See, on the evening she received the railroad company's response to her 6 questions. She brought the letter to the kitchen table and read it once more, and then set it down and looked at him. See, do you have a view on the railroad easement? She asked. See, he looked up from the supply invoice he'd been reading. See, he hadn't expected to be asked. It depends what you want to do with the land, he said carefully. See, I haven't decided what I want to do with the land, she said. See, that's why I'm asking whether you have a view. He was quiet for a moment, weighing the invitation against the habit of restraint. See, the easement gives them access without giving them ownership, he said finally. See, if the terms are limited and time-bound and you have a reversal clause, it's income without permanent loss. See, but you'd want to read the access restrictions carefully, because a railroad easement that prevents you from certain uses of adjacent land can end up costing you more than the payment is worth. See, that's what I was thinking, she said. The access restrictions in paragraph 4 are written broadly. See, too broadly, he said, and then stopped, apparently conscious of having just gone further into her business than he'd intended. See, she was already reaching for the letter. Come look at this with me. See, he came and looked, and they spent an hour at the kitchen table going through the railroad letter paragraph by paragraph, and by the end of it, they had identified 2 clauses she was going to push back on, and 1 she could live with in modified form. See, and Lenora came in and made coffee at some point, and neither of them noticed immediately. See, it was Lenora's expression when she set the cups down careful, warm, saying nothing that made Eliza notice. See, she looked at the kitchen, at the lamp burning in the corner. See, at the 2 cups, at the letter between them on the table. See, at Gideon's handwriting in the margin, where she'd asked him to note his concerns, and he'd done it in the compact, precise hand of a man who was not a natural writer, but was careful with the things he committed to paper. See, at Rourke Ridge, unasked for and unexpected, feeling exactly like a place she had been before. See, she did not say any of this. She picked up her coffee and went back to paragraph 4. See, the inheritance was formally confirmed on a Tuesday, the same day of the week, as the first letter had arrived, which she noticed and chose not to read significance into. See, Webb sent a boy to the ranch with the final documents, and this time when he called her name from the doorway of wherever she was working, See, she came not with her heart in her throat, but with the steady anticipation of a thing she had already decided to receive. See, she signed her name on the confirmation document in the kitchen, with Lenora watching, and Maeve watching, and Gideon standing in the doorway from the hall, and the signature was plain and clear and took up exactly the space it needed. See, hers. She set down the pen. She looked at the document. See, she thought about her great-uncle Harlan, who had come west 30 years ago with a land grant and a surveyor's map, and the rare distinction of reading what he signed, and who had left her, see, a niece he had never met, more than she would have known how to ask for. See, she thought about what a person does with more than they knew how to ask for. See, that night she wrote a long letter to the Eastern lawyer's office, authorizing the negotiation of the railroad easement on her specified terms, the modified access restrictions, the reversal clause, see, the time limit, and directing that the resulting income be divided 3 ways. See, one portion she designated for her own account. See, one portion she directed toward purchasing additional grazing acreage adjacent to the Rourke Ridge property to be held in Gideon's name as repayment for shelter and support, provided without obligation. She used that exact language. See, because she was not going to frame it as charity in either direction. See, and the third portion she set aside for something she had been thinking about since the second week of her stay. See, when she had lain in the spare room, listening to the ranch, and thought about what it would mean if someone had not given her a door to come through. See, she wrote the letter in 2 drafts. The second was better. See, she sealed it and set it by the door to go with the morning boy to Webb. See, then she went to find Gideon. See, he was in the barn, of course he was, because the barn was where Gideon Rourke went when he was thinking and didn't want it to be visible, which she had understood for some time and had not mentioned because it was his business. See, she came in without announcing herself, and he looked up from the stall he was checking and read her face and went back to what he was doing. See, it's final, he said. It wasn't a question, signed today. She leaned against the post opposite him. See, I wrote to the lawyer tonight. Authorized the easement on the modified terms. See, he nodded. Good terms. Better after your help with paragraph 4, she said. See, he shrugged in the way of someone who doesn't know how to accept credit for a thing they did. See, I allocated some of the easement income to additional grazing land adjacent to the ranch, she said. See, in your name. I want you to argue with me about it so we can resolve it quickly. See, he looked up at her. It's repayment, she said before he could speak. See, not charity, not sentiment repayment for documented costs. See, room and board for several weeks, use of wagon and horse on multiple occasions, legal consultation, moral support of various kinds. See, I put a number to it, and this is what that number looks like. See, if you want to dispute the accounting, I'm happy to show you the ledger. See, he looked at her for a long moment with the expression she knew best now, the one that meant something was happening under the surface that was not going to be announced immediately. See, you put moral support in the ledger, he said. I valued it at a reasonable rate, she said. See, you're impossible, he said. You knew that in week 2, she said. See, week 1, he said, the night you found the ledger errors. See, that was when I knew. The barn was quiet around them. See, a horse shifted in its stall. The lamp swung slightly in a draft from the high window. See, Eliza stood with her shoulder against the post and looked at the man across from her, who had been, for 6 weeks, see, the most consistently honest person in her daily life, honest in the particular way of someone who could not sustain a false front because he lacked the interest in sustaining it rather than the ability. See, I'm not going back east, she said. He went still. See, that's not me asking you anything, she said. I want to be clear about that. See, it's a statement of my own decision, made for my own reasons. See, the land can be managed through Webb and the lawyer without my physical presence. See, there is work here that I am good at and that needs doing. See, and she stopped because she did not have precise language for the next part, which was unusual for her. I have come to find this place more like home than any place I have lived. See, that is not nothing to me. He set down what he was holding. See, Eliza, he said. I'm not finished, she said. All right. See, I'm also aware, she said, that I have been living in your house for 6 weeks and working in your records and eating at your table, and that there is a particular shape to the last 6 weeks that looks, from the outside, see, like something it may or may not be on the inside. See, and I am not interested in being in a situation whose shape I am not certain about. See, so I am going to ask you something directly, and I would like you to answer it the way you answer everything, which is without decoration. See, he looked at her with the full attention of a man who has stopped doing anything else. See, do you want me to stay, she said. Not at the ranch. See, not as the woman who does the accounts. Do you want me to stay? See, the barn was very quiet. Yes, he said. No preamble, no qualification, no elaborate surrounding language. See, the same way he said everything that mattered. I have wanted that for a while. See, I didn't ask because I thought asking was pressure. See, that you'd feel obligated. I know, she said. Maeve explained your methods. See, something moved across his face that she would remember for a long time. See, of course she did. She loves you, Eliza said. She just doesn't think you're always efficient. See, she's not wrong. He came around the side of the stall toward her and stopped within a few feet, close enough that the quality of the air between them changed. See, I'm not going to be easy to be with, he said. I mean that honestly. See, I don't always know what I'm feeling until several days after I should have. See, I work too much. I carry things by myself longer than I should, and I'm aware of it, and I still do it. See, the ranch has good years and bad years, and I can't always predict which is coming. See, I kept 12 forged letters in a tin box for 4 months because they were the only kindness I had been offered in years, she said. See, I am not looking for easy. I have never had easy. See, I am looking for real. He was quiet for a moment. See, then I can give you real. I know, she said. That's why I'm staying. See, she put her hand out, not a gesture of romance, not anything soft, the plain direct handshake of two people who have just reached an agreement on terms they both understand, and he took it and held it. See, and then the handshake became something else, without either of them deciding it had. And she found herself thinking that this was approximately the least graceful, significant moment she had ever had, and that was exactly right. See, because nothing real was ever graceful, and she was finished with things that looked right from the outside. See, they stood in the barn, in the lamplight, with the horses shifting around them, and the moment was not beautiful in any way that would be worth describing to anyone, and it was the truest thing that had happened to her in 22 years. See, she pulled back first because she was still herself. See, I need to talk to your mother, she said. She already knows, he said. See, of course she does. She's known since the 2nd week, he said. See, what happened in the 2nd week? She said you looked at the kitchen table like it was yours, he said. See, and she said you didn't know you were doing it. She said that was the only difference between someone staying and someone visiting, whether they've started to claim the room without realizing it. See, Eliza stood with that for a moment. She thought about the kitchen table. See, about the ledgers spread across it, the tin box, the letters in order, the 2 cups of coffee that Lenora had set down when neither of them noticed. See, your mother is very perceptive, she said. It's terrifying, he said entirely seriously. See, she laughed. It surprised her. The way real laughter sometimes does, coming up from somewhere lower than expected, without the social performance that laughter usually carries. See, he looked at her when she laughed with the expression of a man who has been shown something he intends to remember. See, she went to the house and found Lenora in the front room with her mending. See, which was a fiction Lenora maintained for approximately 4 seconds before she set it down and looked at Eliza with the expression of a woman who knows the answer to a question and is waiting for the person to say it aloud. See, I'm staying, Eliza said. Lenora said nothing for a moment. See, then she said, sit down. Eliza sat. Lenora looked at her not with the warmth of a woman getting what she wanted, but with something more considered than that. See, something that respected the weight of what had just been said. See, you're not staying because of Gideon, Lenora said. See, it was not quite a question. No, Eliza said, he's part of it. See, but I'm staying because this is where I want to be. See, because I have work I want to do here, and a place I want to put roots, and because she looked at the room, at the fire, see, at the repaired chairs and the worn rug and the window that looked out on the dark yard, because someone opened a door here without asking what I was worth first. See, and I intend to pay that forward. Lenora looked at her for a long moment. See, that third part of the easement money, Lenora said. See, the part you didn't tell us about. Eliza looked at her. See, I read the draft on the kitchen table, Lenora said. See, I wasn't snooping. It was there, I know, Eliza said. See, I left it there, a pause. You left it there on purpose. See, I wanted to know what you'd say if you saw it, Eliza said. See, not to me, but to yourself. Your expression when you read things you're not expecting to. See, Lenora studied her with an expression that contained, underneath all its other components, the particular warmth of a woman who has found someone operating on a wavelength she recognizes. See, you're going to build something, Lenora said. I'm going to try, Eliza said. See, the something she was going to try to build had been forming in her mind since the second week. See, when she had lain in the spare room and thought about what Rourke Ridge had given her by doing nothing more than being a household where the door was open to someone who needed it. See, she had thought about the women she had known in her years of working situations, women between places, women without family, women with children and no resources, women arriving somewhere new with nothing but the determination to find a foothold. See, women who ended up in circumstances far worse than Eliza's because they had come to a place where no door opened. See, the third portion of the easement income she had directed in the letter to the lawyer toward establishing a fund for the establishment of a boarding facility on Rourke Ridge, land not charity, not an institution. See, nothing that required a woman to demonstrate need in front of someone with the power to judge it. See, a working arrangement. See, rooms in exchange for labor. See, fair rates for those who had money. See, no rates for those who didn't. See, for a period long enough to get stable. See, a place where the first thing a woman heard when she arrived was not an assessment of her worth but an offer of a room and something to eat. See, she explained this to Gideon the following morning at the kitchen table, with Lenora and Maeve present, because she was not going to make decisions about the ranch without the whole family understanding them. See, and when she was done explaining, she put the third draft of the plan cleaner now, more specific, with costs and projected timeline, and a proposed arrangement with the Rourke family for land use in the middle of the table. See, nobody said anything for a moment. Then Maeve said, "You're building a place for women like you were." See, women in the position I was in, Eliza said carefully. See, not like me specifically. A lot of different women end up stranded in a lot of different ways. See, but you'd know what they need, Maeve said, because you needed it. See, that's the idea, Eliza said. Gideon was reading the plan. See, he turned the third page over and read the back, which was the cost projection, and his face did the thing it did with numbers, quiet attention, real engagement, no performance. See, the land use arrangement is fair, he said. Fairer than it needs to be. See, I don't want it to be charity to the ranch either, she said. See, this is a working arrangement between two entities. See, I want the terms to reflect that. They do. He set the pages down. See, I'd change one thing. What? The timeline for the first facility. See, you've got 14 months. You can do it in 10 if you start the foundation work before the first snow. See, she looked at him. You want it done sooner. I want it done, he said. See, sooner is better. She looked at Lenora, who was looking at the plan with an expression that was doing its best not to be as moved as it was. See, we'll need help with the construction, Lenora said. See, Bram Keller knows men in town who've been looking for work since the Eastern mine closed. See, good workers. Honest, I can ask him, Eliza said. See, I'll ask him, Gideon said. You write the specifications. See, I'll handle the hiring. We each do what we're better at. See, that was the arrangement they settled on, and it was not elegant, and they didn't shake on it formally, because by that point shaking on things formally seemed beside the point. See, and Maeve immediately started asking whether she could help with the construction. See, which led to a 20-minute conversation That ended with her being assigned to the supply procurement because she was demonstrably better at getting fair prices out of the Red Hollow mercantile than anyone in the family. See, a skill she had developed over 3 years of going to market and simply refusing to accept the first number anyone gave her. See, that skill, Eliza reflected, had apparently been there all along. See, it had just needed a context in which to be useful. See, the months that followed were the fullest of Eliza's life, and also in some ways the hardest, because building things from the ground up is not the same as imagining them, and the gap between the two is where most ambitions break down. See, there were problems she hadn't anticipated, a supply delay that pushed the foundation work back 6 weeks, a disagreement with one of the hired workers about a structural decision that required Eliza to be more direct than she was comfortable being. See, a period in October when the costs ran ahead of the first easement payment, and she had to make uncomfortable decisions about what to delay. See, she made them. She didn't enjoy making them, and she didn't always make them gracefully. See, and there was an afternoon in October when she sat on the unfinished foundation in the cold and felt the particular despair of someone who started something larger than their resources and cannot yet see whether it will hold. See, she sat there for about 20 minutes, and then Gideon came and sat beside her without being asked and didn't say anything useful or reassuring, just sat there in the cold being present, and after a while that was enough. See, she got up and went back to the problem. See, that was how most of it went, not triumphantly, not smoothly, but one problem at a time in the company of people who showed up when it mattered and didn't require her to perform gratitude for their showing up. See, the facility opened the following spring on a clear April morning when the cottonwoods along the creek were just beginning to show green, and the air smelled like the particular freshness of a season that hasn't been used yet. See, it was not grand. It was a solidly built structure with 6 rooms, a common kitchen, a washing facility, a workroom, and a small office for the person managing the arrangement, which, for the first 2 years, was Eliza herself. See, though she had already begun thinking about whom she would eventually train to take it over, because the point was for it to outlast her direct involvement, not to depend on it. See, the first woman who arrived came on a Wednesday. See, she was perhaps 30, with 2 children under 5, and a bruise on her jaw she hadn't explained, and a look in her eyes that Eliza recognized as the particular alertness of someone who has had to assess every room she enters for whether it is safe. See, Eliza showed her the room. It had a window that faced east and a bed with a clean quilt and a peg on the wall. See, a basin in the hall. The kitchen's available in the morning at 6, Eliza said. See, if you need it before that, come get me. The children can sleep in the room with you, or there's a smaller room adjoining, whichever you prefer. See, the woman looked at her. She had the look of someone waiting for the rest of it, the conditions, the requirements, the thing that was going to be asked of her in return. See, Eliza waited and let the silence be what it was. What do I have to do? The woman finally asked. See, when you're settled, Eliza said, we'll talk about what you can do and what work needs doing. See, but that's later. Right now, you need to sleep, and your children need to eat something, and neither of those things requires you to have figured out the rest yet. See, the woman looked at her for a long moment. Then her face did something complicated, and she pressed her hand against her mouth and looked at the east window. See, and Eliza recognized every part of that moment without needing it explained, because she had stood in a strange room with an east window herself and had been given something she didn't know how to receive. See, she left the woman to it and went back to the main house. See, Gideon was at the kitchen table with the fall accounts. See, which he had learned not to let accumulate past 2 weeks, because Eliza would reorganize them in a way that was more efficient, and also made him feel gently corrected, and he looked up when she came in. See, first one arrived, she said. How is she? Tired, Eliza said. See, 2 children. She'll be all right. He nodded. You all right? See, she stood in the kitchen doorway and thought about it. Honestly, the way she had learned to think about things since she'd come to Rourke Ridge, not with the answer she was supposed to give, but with the actual answer. See, yes, she said. I think I actually am. The winter had come and gone and come again by the time Eliza and Gideon married. See, the ceremony was small and outside, under the cottonwoods along the creek, on a morning in late September when the air had the particular blue clarity of a season beginning to let go. See, Keller was there, and Webb and Maeve in a dress she had made herself with visible effort and visible imperfection and enormous pride. See, and Lenora in her good clothes with her hair done, in a way that suggested she had spent more time on it than she would admit. See, there was no elaborate anything. Eliza wore a dress she had made from fabric she had chosen herself, a practical blue that she had picked because she liked it. See, not because it was traditional. And Gideon wore his best jacket and his only tie and looked distinctly uncomfortable in the tie. And she had thought about telling him to take it off, and then decided she liked that he had worn it. See, when Keller, who served as justice of the peace in addition to his law enforcement duties, asked whether they were ready, Gideon looked at her, and she looked at him, and neither of them was certain about everything the future contained: the ranch. See, the facility, the work still undone, the arguments they would undoubtedly have about things they had not yet discovered they disagreed on. See, the years of ordinary and difficult and occasionally wonderful that were arranged in front of them in no order they could predict. See, neither of them was certain about all of it. They were certain about this part. See, ready, Gideon said. Yes, Eliza said. The ceremony took 11 minutes. See, the breakfast afterward took 2 hours and was considerably louder, mostly because Maeve had a great deal to say and had been waiting through 11 minutes of ceremony to say it. See, Lenora sat at the end of the table and watched her family with the expression of a woman who has lived long enough to understand that what she was looking at was not perfect and was not finished and would ask more of all of them before it asked less. See, and who looked at it anyway with something that was, in its plain, unadorned version, joy. See, Eliza's battered suitcase she put on a shelf near the front door of the facility. See, not in storage, not in a back room visible, accessible in the first space that anyone entering the building would see. See, she was asked about it, more than once, by the women who passed through what it was, why it was there, whether it had some special meaning. See, she told them the truth. She had arrived with that suitcase and nothing else, on a train that had already left, on a platform that was otherwise empty, in a territory she had never seen. See, on the basis of a lie that someone had constructed to take from her the one thing she hadn't known she had. See, and someone had opened a door. That's why it's here, she said. See, so you know this door opens the same way. See, most of the women who asked about the suitcase were sitting somewhere in the transition between who they had been and who they were figuring out how to become, and the answer she gave them was not designed to be inspiring. See, it was designed to be true, because the truth was more useful to a woman in difficulty than inspiration, and Eliza Marlowe, who was now Eliza Rourke but kept both names because they were both hers, had learned that truth was the only thing that actually held weight when you needed something to hold on to. Red Hollow grew over the following years in the way of frontier towns that find their footing not dramatically, but steadily, adding to itself with the particular pragmatic confidence of a community that has decided to stay. The facility became, in time, a known thing in the territory, not famous, not celebrated in any formal way, but known the way genuinely useful things become known. Which is by the specific and persistent testimony of people who needed something and found it there. Women arrived. Some stayed in Red Hollow, some went on. Some built things in other places and sent word back. Some sent other women with nowhere to go, the way one door eventually leads to another door being opened further down the road. The battered suitcase stayed on its shelf, and Eliza Rourke, who had once stood alone on a train platform with a forged letter and a tin box and the practiced survival instinct of a woman who had spent her whole life being told, Schummel, she was not quite enough, went on being not quite enough in the various ways that, real people are not quite enough, which is to say she was sometimes too stubborn and occasionally wrong and not always patient, and still, some mornings, surprised by the fact of her own life, by the particular shape it had taken from the raw material of one very bad day. See, she had not built a legacy. She had built something more durable than that. See, she had built a door that stayed open, and every woman who walked through it into a room she could call hers, even briefly, even just long enough to sleep and eat and figure out what came next. Every one of them was the whole point. See, not the inheritance, not the easement, not the railroad money, or the legal victory, or the man she had married, or even the family she had found. See, the point was the door. The point had always been the door.